They say every monster was once a child. That innocence isn't lost all at once. It fades, quietly, behind closed doors. Most daughters grow into the reflection of their mother's love, but some learn to love the darkness instead. This is not about rebellion. It's not about anger or teenage disobedience. This is about the moment a child decides that family is no longer sacred. 10 daughters, 10 crimes that shattered the line between love and horror, each one believing that killing was the only way to be free. These are their stories. And once you hear them, you'll never look at innocence the same way again. Medicine Hat, Canada. A quiet prairie town where the wind carries dust across empty streets, where neighbors still wave from their porches, and children play under skies that seem too wide to hold any secrets. But one April night in 2006, the town learned that even paradise can bleed. Her name was Jasmine Richardson, 12 years old, barely 5 feet tall, a child who should have been worried about homework, crushes, and summer break. Instead, she was planning a massacre. To her teachers, Jasmine was bright, creative, a little shy. To her parents, she was their only daughter, their pride, their promise. But to one man online, a 23-year-old named Jeremy Steinke, she was something else entirely. They met on a Gothic chat forum, the kind filled with dark poetry, broken hearts, and teenage fantasies about death and love. Jeremy was obsessed with vampires. He told people he was a 500-year-old werewolf who lived off blood and pain. He bragged about it, and Jasmine listened. Because when you're 12 and you want to feel older than you are, monsters can sound romantic. He told her she was mature, different, special. And when you tell a child something often enough, they start to believe it. They wrote about running away together, about living free, about love that would last forever. But every fairy tale has a villain, and in Jasmine's eyes, that villain became her parents. Her mother grounded her, her father took her computer away. They told her she was too young for Jeremy, too young to understand. And they were right, but Jasmine saw it differently. She told friends her parents were trying to ruin her life. She said they needed to go. The words began as teenage anger, but Jeremy took them seriously. He said if they couldn't be together in life, they'd be together in death. He told her, "I would kill for you." And she said, "Would you really?" What began as fantasy turned into planning. They wrote messages filled with code words and hearts. They talked about timing, weapons, blood, and on the night of April the 22nd, they made it real. Jasmine waited until her parents were asleep. Jeremy slipped through the basement window, knife in hand. The house was quiet, too quiet. Her mother, Deborah, heard something and came downstairs. She never made it to the bottom step. Jeremy stabbed her again and again. Her father, Mark, woke to the sound of screaming. He ran toward the noise, fighting for his family, but Jeremy was stronger. By the time it was over, both parents were dead. Upstairs, 8-year-old Jacob was still in his room, hiding beneath his blankets. He whispered for his sister, and Jasmine came. She later told police she didn't want him to be alone, that she thought killing him was an act of mercy. She slit his throat. Then she left. When it was done, she and Jeremy walked to a friend's house. They laughed, they kissed, they bragged about being modern-day outlaws. Jeremy told friends, seriously, it was awesome. Jasmine called it something we had to do. The next morning, a young boy came to the Richardson house to play with Jacob. He found the bodies instead. Police followed the digital trail, messages, notes, plans written like love letters. Within 24 hours, they arrested Jasmine and Jeremy in a nearby town. They were hiding in plain sight, curled up together in a truck. In custody, Jasmine said, "I loved them, but I loved him more." Those words echoed through the courtroom months later. The trial was surreal. A child so small she could barely reach the witness stand, accused of planning her parents' and brothers' deaths. The defense argued manipulation, that Jeremy, the adult, had brainwashed her. The prosecution argued choice, that love does not erase intent. In the end, the jury found her guilty of 3 counts of murder. Because she was only 12, Canadian law could not sentence her to life. She received 10 years, 4 in custody, and 6 under supervision. Jeremy received life without parole for 25 years. When she walked free at 22, she had a new name, a new face, and a degree in social work. She said she had found peace. But peace can't grow in soil watered with blood. In Medicine Hat, The Richardson house was eventually sold. Neighbors still cross the street when they pass it, and sometimes, late at night, you can still hear people whisper her name, the girl who killed her family for love. Her story became a myth, a warning passed from parent to child, that monsters are not born, they are made by obsession, by fantasy, by the dangerous illusion that love can justify anything. But as the world tried to understand how a 12-year-old could orchestrate such horror, another girl, thousands of miles away, was already planning her own rebellion. She wasn't 12. She wasn't naive. She wasn't seduced by vampires or fantasy. Her enemy wasn't a forbidden love. It was the people who raised her. And in her quiet, picture-perfect town, her rage would explode with the same devastating force. Her name was Sarah Johnson, Bellevue, Idaho, a postcard town folded neatly between mountains and sky. A place where mornings smell like pine and families leave their doors unlocked. A place where no one could imagine that a 16-year-old girl would turn her childhood home into a battlefield. Her name was Sarah Johnson. She was 16, blonde, pretty, smart enough to get good grades, confident enough to charm everyone she met. Her father, Alan, was a respected engineer. Her mother, Diane, worked for the local police department. To neighbors, they were perfect, the kind of family that set the standard for everyone else. But perfection is a fragile disguise, and behind the walls of the Johnson home, tension was building. Sarah had fallen in love with an older boy, 19-year-old Bruno Santos. He wasn't the kind of boy her parents wanted for her. He came from a rougher part of town, worked odd jobs, and didn't fit the picture-perfect life her parents had imagined for their daughter. When they found out about the relationship, they tried to end it. They grounded her, took her phone, told her to focus on school. To Sarah, it wasn't protection, it was betrayal. The more they pushed, the harder she pushed back. She told friends she hated them, that they didn't understand her, that they wanted to ruin her life. And somewhere between anger and infatuation, the line between fantasy and reality began to blur. She started sneaking out to see Bruno. She told him she wanted to be with him forever, that her parents stood in the way. Bruno told her to be patient, to wait until she was older. But Sarah didn't want to wait. She wanted freedom now, and she believed she knew how to get it. On the morning of September the 2nd, 2003, the sun rose over Bellevue as it always did. Alan and Diane Johnson were still asleep in their bed. Their daughter was already awake. She had her father's rifle in her hands. At 7 o'clock, neighbors heard two sharp sounds, gunshots. But in a hunting town like Bellevue, nobody thought much of it. Minutes later, Sarah ran out of the house, screaming for help, crying that her parents had been murdered. When police arrived, they found Diane Johnson dead in bed, a single bullet through her head. Alan lay on the floor nearby, killed as he tried to reach for the phone. The rifle had been wiped clean, but investigators found no sign of forced entry. The house was locked from the inside. Sarah was hysterical. At least, that's how it looked. But as detectives listened, they began to notice cracks in her story. She said she'd been asleep. Then she said she'd just gotten home from school. She couldn't remember which door she'd entered through. She couldn't explain why her robe had gunshot residue on the sleeves. And then, the smallest detail broke everything open. She said she'd seen her parents' bodies in their room, but she claimed she'd never gone inside. Except to see what she described, she would have had to. When police searched her belongings, they found love letters from Bruno and plans. Notes describing what life would be like once she did what had to be done. Bruno denied everything. He said he never wanted anyone hurt. That Sarah had talked about killing her parents before, but he didn't think she meant it. The evidence said otherwise. In the garage, investigators found bloody latex gloves. In the bathroom, a shower that had just been used. In Sarah's trash can, a towel soaked in her mother's blood. The case was clear. Sarah Johnson had killed her parents because they told her no. In court, the girl who had once been the pride of Bellevue sat stone-faced. She cried when the photos were shown, but not for the reasons most expected. Witnesses said her tears felt rehearsed. Her defense team claimed she'd been manipulated by Bruno, blinded by teenage love. But the jury didn't see love. They saw calculation, they saw intent. After a 2-week trial, Sarah Johnson was found guilty still of 2 counts of first-degree murder. The judge called her crime a betrayal beyond comprehension. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Even after her sentencing, Sarah continued to write to Bruno. Letters filled with devotion and delusion. In one, she wrote, "I would kill for you again." But Bruno, facing his own charges, testified against her. In the end, she lost everything: her parents, her freedom, and the love she killed for. Years later, her father's surviving family said they still couldn't bring themselves to forgive her, not because she killed, but because she never admitted why. Because she still believed she was right. Today, Sarah Johnson sits in an Idaho prison, her name almost forgotten outside those walls. But in Bellevue, her story remains a ghost, a whisper of what happens when love becomes entitlement and freedom becomes a weapon. Because Sarah didn't kill for hate, she killed for control. The same control her parents had tried to keep over her. And in the end, she proved they were right about the boy, but too late to stop her. The Johnson house was sold years ago. New owners moved in. They painted the walls, tried to erase the past. But there are still nights when neighbors swear they can see a light flicker in that upstairs window. The window of a 16-year-old girl who thought murder would set her free. But freedom is a word too often confused with escape. And for one girl in Texas, that confusion would burn down her entire world. Her name was Erin Caffey. Texas. A quiet road, a 2-story wooden house surrounded by pine trees, and a girl who thought love meant loyalty, no matter the cost. Her name was Erin Caffey. She was 16 years old. To her community, she was a preacher's daughter, sweet, soft-spoken, a singer in the church choir. To her parents, Terry and Penny, she was the heart of their world. To her boyfriend, Charlie Wilkinson, she was something entirely different. Charlie was 18, wild, and fascinated by rebellion. He told Erin she was perfect, that no one understood her the way he did. He said they were destined to be together forever. Every parent hears those words eventually, but most don't realize how dangerous they can be. Terry and Penny didn't approve of Charlie. They told Erin to stop seeing him. They grounded her, took her phone, and told her to think about her future. But Erin was 16, and when you're 16, love feels like war. Every boundary her parents set only pulled her closer to him. She told Charlie that her parents hated her, that they wanted to ruin her life. Charlie said she didn't need them anymore. He said, "If they stand in the way, we get rid of them." Erin didn't laugh. She asked, "When?" The plan took shape over text messages and whispers. Charlie brought in 2 friends, Charles Wade and Bobby Johnson. They talked about money, cars, freedom. Erin talked about love. On the night of March the 1st, 2008, Terry and Penny were asleep upstairs. Their sons, Matthew and Tyler, were in their rooms down the hall. The house was quiet. Erin unlocked the door. Then she waited. At 2 in the morning, Charlie and his friends crept in through the front door. They were armed with knives, guns, and gasoline. The first scream came from Penny's room. Charlie stabbed her again and again. Terry woke to chaos, fought back, and was shot in the face. Erin, hiding outside, could hear everything. Down the hallway, the killers turned on the boys. Matthew was 13, Tyler was 8. They never had a chance. Before leaving, they poured gasoline through the house and set it on fire. Terry, somehow still alive, crawled out a side window. His body was burned, his lungs filled with smoke. He managed to drag himself to a neighbor's house. He told them what had happened. He said the words that broke the whole town. "My daughter was with them." By sunrise, the Caffey house was a shell of smoke and ash. Inside, investigators found the bodies of Penny, Matthew, and Tyler. And within hours, police found Erin at a restaurant parking lot, sitting beside Charlie, calmly drinking a milkshake. When asked if she knew what had happened, she said yes. When asked why, she said, "Because I wanted to be with him." Her father, lying in a hospital bed, refused to believe it. He thought she'd been forced, trapped, brainwashed. But when police showed him the text messages, plans written in her own words, the truth sank in. His daughter had been the architect. In court, Erin wept, but the evidence was undeniable. The judge called it the most chilling example of misplaced love he had ever seen. She was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Charlie received life without parole. Years later, Terry Caffey visited his daughter in prison. He told her he forgave her. He said forgiveness was the only way he could keep living. But forgiveness doesn't erase the past. It only teaches you how to carry it. In interviews, Erin has said she was manipulated, that she never believed her family would actually die. But the truth is simpler and harder. She opened the door. She let evil in. and evil wore the face of the boy she loved. Today, Erin still writes letters from prison. She says she wants to help others avoid her mistakes, but her story remains one of the darkest examples of what happens when teenage love turns into idolatry. Because in the end, Erin didn't kill out of hate. She killed out of devotion, a devotion that burned hotter than reason and left nothing but ashes behind. The charred remains of the Caffey home were bulldozed years ago. Grass grows there now. Wildflowers bloom every spring. But no one in that town drives past without remembering, because love, when twisted, becomes the deadliest weapon of all. And while Texas tried to move on, across the ocean in England, another daughter was preparing her own version of control, one that would take years to uncover, and bodies buried right beneath her feet. Her name was Virginia McCullough, Lincolnshire, England. A town of salt air and silence. The kind of place where people water their gardens at the same time every evening, where life moves slowly and nothing ever really changes. At least, that's what everyone thought. John and Susan McCullough had lived in Lincolnshire their whole lives. They were the sort of people who waved at passing cars, who paid bills on time, who remembered birthdays. Ordinary, reliable, quiet. Their daughter Virginia was different. She was 23, clever, restless, and tired of being treated like a child. She lived with her parents still, though she told friends she was desperate to move out. She said her parents controlled everything. She said they made her life hell. Everyone has arguments at home, but Virginia's anger didn't fade. It fermented. In August of 2019, the McCullough house fell silent. No one saw John or Susan again. Their car stayed parked in the drive, curtains drawn, lights off. Neighbors assumed they were away, maybe on a trip. Their daughter said so after all. When people asked where her parents had gone, Virginia smiled politely. "They're traveling," she'd say, "somewhere quiet. They needed a break." And everyone believed her. She was calm, well-spoken, even cheerful. She paid the bills, collected the mail, mowed the lawn. From the outside, nothing looked wrong. Inside, everything was rotten. Beneath the small garden shed, under 2 feet of soil, John and Susan McCullough lay side by side, wrapped in plastic sheeting. The smell of bleach hung in the air, but no one thought to question it. For 4 years, Virginia lived with their bodies in her backyard. She faked their lives with emails, texts, and letters she wrote herself. She responded to relatives as Mum and Dad, saying they were fine, just busy, just tired, just away. She told friends she was house-sitting for them. She used their credit cards. She paid bills in their names. She even sent Christmas cards signed in her mother's handwriting. It was a lie that became a routine that became a life. But all lies have an expiration date. In 2023, a distant family member grew suspicious. Too many excuses, too much time. They called the police. Officers arrived one September morning. They knocked. Virginia answered, smiling. They asked where her parents were. She said, "They're on holiday." Her voice didn't tremble. Her hands didn't shake. But the officers noticed things. The smell of chemicals, the soil under her fingernails, the way her eyes flicked toward the garden when they mentioned her parents' names. They asked to have a look around. Virginia hesitated, then nodded. Out back, the air was heavy, and the ground beneath the shed was freshly disturbed. When the officer started digging, she whispered one sentence. "Oh, you found them." She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood there, watching as her secret surfaced. At the station, she confessed, calmly, methodically, like she'd rehearsed every word. She said she'd poisoned her parents after an argument about money, that she couldn't take it anymore, that they never listened. She described how she dragged their bodies outside, how she cleaned the floor, how she slept in her bed that night and felt peaceful. Her confession chilled even the most hardened detectives. It wasn't the violence that disturbed them. It was the stillness, the absence of remorse. When police asked why she had kept up the lie for 4 years, she said, "I didn't want anyone to know I failed." In court, she sat expressionless as the charges were read. 2 counts of murder, fraud, deception. She nodded when asked if she understood. She smiled once. When a reporter tripped over her name, the defense claimed mental illness. The prosecution said control. They called her manipulative, calculating, and entirely sane. The jury agreed. Virginia McCullough was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 31 years before she can even apply for parole. When the verdict was read, she didn't react. No tears, no emotion, just that same calm face that had hidden murder for nearly half a decade. After her sentencing, neighbors said they couldn't believe it, that she'd seemed so normal, that she waved every morning, that she'd brought their mail once when it was delivered to the wrong address. One neighbor said, "She fooled us all." But evil doesn't always look like evil. Sometimes it looks like composure. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it answers the door politely while death sleeps under the floorboards. For 4 years, Virginia lived above the graves of her parents. She ate breakfast, watched television, and went to bed each night knowing exactly what she had done. The line between guilt and comfort had simply disappeared. In the end, the most terrifying thing about her story isn't that she killed them. It's that she lives so easily with it. Even now in prison, she tells psychiatrists that she feels relieved, that she has closure, that she can finally breathe. Her story is not about rage or madness or passion. It's about the quiet satisfaction of control, the cold comfort of a world where no one can tell you what to do, where the only voices left are the ones in your head. The McCullough house still stands in Lincolnshire, but no one lives there now. The garden has overgrown, the shed torn down, the earth still darker than it should be. And while England tried to understand how a daughter could bury her parents and pretend they were still alive, across the ocean in Florida, another daughter was preparing her own escape. Not with poison or patience, but with fury, a teenage firestorm that would consume everything she touched. Her name was Carly Madison Gregg, Florida, a place where the air hangs heavy and the sun never seems to set. A place where teenagers grow up too fast and dreams fade behind the heat and the noise. Carly Madison Gregg was 16 years old. To her neighbors, she was just another restless girl, sharp-tongued, moody, and constantly arguing with her mother, Rebecca. They lived in a small house outside Jacksonville, a house filled with tension that never seemed to cool. Rebecca was strict but loving. She worked long hours at a local clinic, came home exhausted, and tried to keep her daughter on the right path. But Carly didn't want to be told what to do. She wanted control. She wanted freedom. At school, she drifted away from her friends. Her grades slipped. Her teachers noticed she had become angry. Not loud angry, but quiet angry, the kind that festers. Then she met Jason. Jason was 19, charming in a reckless sort of way. He dropped out of high school, drove too fast, and had nothing to offer but trouble. Carly didn't care. He listened to her. He told her she was beautiful, that her mother didn't understand her. He told her she was meant for something bigger. And Carly, lost and hungry for attention, believed him. Their relationship grew fast and toxic just as quickly. Carly started sneaking out, lying to her mother, and spending nights at Jason's apartment. When Rebecca found out, she tried to stop it. She took Carly's phone, locked her in her room, and said, "You're 16. You'll thank me one day." Carly didn't thank her. She decided to kill her. The idea started as a joke, something she said to Jason one night when she was angry. He laughed. She didn't. Over the next few weeks, their messages grew darker. Carly wrote that she wanted her gone. Jason said he could make it happen. She said, "Do it for me." He said, "Only if you're sure." She replied, "I'm sure." On a humid Friday night in March, Rebecca Gregg came home late. Dinner sat cold on the counter. Carly barely looked at her. She said she was tired. She waited for her, mother, to fall asleep on the couch. Then she texted Jason, "Now!" Minutes later, he slipped in through the back door with a knife. Rebecca woke to the sound of footsteps. She barely had time to scream. The attack was brutal and fast. Carly stood nearby, frozen, watching her mother's life end as if it were happening on a screen. Afterward, they dragged the body to the garage. Jason poured gasoline. Carly struck the match. The house went up in flames. They drove away holding hands, talking about starting over, as if they hadn't just murdered the only person who had ever fought to protect her. But freedom doesn't last long when it's built on fire. The blaze was contained before it could destroy everything. Investigators quickly determined the fire was arson. Inside the garage, they found what was left of Rebecca Gregg. Her cause of death wasn't the fire, it was the knife. Neighbors told police about the constant fights, the strange boy always hanging around. It didn't take long to find Carly. When detectives questioned her, she tried to lie, but her voice shook, and Jason had already confessed. She told them she hadn't meant for it to happen, that she only wanted to scare her mother, that Jason went too far. But the text messages told another story. She was the one who planned it. She was the one who asked for it. She was the one who lit the match. In court, she sat small and silent in a gray jumpsuit. The jury heard about her obsession with control, her fantasies of running away, the messages she sent hours before the murder. Once she's gone, I'll finally be free. When the verdict came, the courtroom was still, guilty of first-degree murder and arson, life in prison. Jason received 40 years. Carly showed no emotion, no tears, no regret, only the faintest smile when her sentence was read. Reporters called her the girl who killed for freedom. Psychologists called her narcissistic, unable to feel empathy, incapable of understanding loss. But the truth was simpler and crueler. Carly didn't hate her mother. She just didn't see her as human. In the years since, she's given a few interviews. She says she was manipulated. She says she was scared. But even now, she never says sorry. She talks about herself, her pain, her regrets. Never about the woman who gave her life. The burned foundation of the Gregg house was torn down. Grass covers it now, but sometimes people still drive by and whisper her name. They wonder how a 16-year-old girl could destroy her own world so completely. Carly's story isn't about rebellion. It's about obsession, the need to control what you can't understand, the hunger to prove you're stronger than love. But love isn't weakness. Love is the thing that tries to save you, even when you have already decided you can't be saved. And while Florida buried the last ashes of the Gregg home, hundreds of miles away in Tennessee, another young girl was beginning to build her own tragedy, a story born from fear, not hate. A story that would end with 2 parents dead and a confused teenage girl claiming she had no choice. Her name was Sarah Grace Patrick, Nashville, Tennessee, a city of bright lights, loud music, and quiet secrets. The place where dreams go to be made or broken. For 15-year-old Sarah Grace Patrick, it was the place where childhood ended, and everything she thought she knew about love and safety turned to ash. Sarah lived with her mother, Elise, and her stepfather, Robert. To anyone looking in, they were ordinary. A modest house on the edge of town, a family that kept to themselves, a teenage girl who smiled in pictures but never with her eyes. She was smart, quiet, a little strange, people said. She got good grades, she never caused trouble. But at home, the air was different. Her stepfather was strict, too strict. He shouted, he slammed doors, and he controlled everything. What she wore, where she went, who she talked to. Her mother said it was discipline. Sarah called it prison. In whispers to her friends, she hinted that Robert was worse than anyone knew, that he hurt her, that her mother looked away. No one could prove it. No one even knew if it was true, but Sarah believed it. And belief is powerful enough to destroy everything. Then she met Dylan, 17, soft-spoken, a boy with kind eyes who wanted to protect her. She told him she was afraid to go home. She told him her stepfather was a monster. She said she wanted to be free. Dylan believed her. He told her he'd do anything for her. She said, "Would you kill for me?" And he said, "If I had to." The plan was simple and terrible. They waited until midnight. Sarah left the back door unlocked. She hid her father's hunting rifle under the kitchen table. Then she waited. When Dylan arrived, the house was quiet. The television flickered in the living room. Robert was asleep on the couch. Elise had gone to bed. Sarah handed Dylan the gun. He hesitated. She didn't. Robert woke as the first shot went off. It hit him in the chest. He tried to stand, but Sarah fired again. Her mother screamed from the bedroom. Sarah followed the sound. One more shot, and then silence. The smell of gunpowder filled the house. The quiet that followed felt heavier than death itself. When police arrived hours later, they found Sarah sitting on the floor, the rifle beside her, her hands shaking, her voice steady. She said, "I did what I had to do." At first, detectives thought it was self-defense. The story of abuse sounded believable until they saw the texts, dozens of them. Messages between her and Dylan talking about how life will finally be ours, how freedom is just one night away. It wasn't desperation, it was planning. At trial, the courtroom split in two. Half saw her as a victim, a child pushed past her limits. The other half saw a manipulator, a girl who used sympathy as a weapon. The prosecution painted her as cold, calculated. The defense said she was broken, a product of years of fear. But when jurors saw the evidence, the messages, the smirk in her mugshot, the way she described the murders as necessary, they made their choice. Sarah was found guilty of second-degree murder. Dylan took a plea deal, 25 years in prison. Sarah received 30. Her voice didn't tremble when the sentence was read. She said, "I don't regret it. I had to save myself." Even now in interviews, she insists she was the victim. She says she had no other choice. But the truth is simpler and sadder. She traded one kind of control for another. She escaped the man she feared only to spend the rest of her life behind bars. Psychologists call her detached. Her surviving relatives call her lost. And somewhere deep inside a Tennessee prison, she still writes letters to Dylan, the boy who said he'd kill for her. Sarah Grace Patrick's story is not one of hate. It's about confusion, the kind that grows when fear and fantasy blur together. Maybe she really was abused, maybe she wasn't. But in the end, the truth didn't matter, because once blood is spilled, no amount of fear can wash it away. Her case became a quiet warning for every parent who thought their child was safe simply because they were quiet. Silence can be the loudest signal of all. And while Tennessee tried to make sense of a teenage girl who believed murder was mercy, another young woman in Missouri was fighting her own invisible prison, one built not from violence, but from lies. A daughter who grew up in a wheelchair she didn't need, fed through tubes she didn't require, told she was dying when she wasn't. And when she finally found the courage to fight back, the world couldn't decide if she was a monster or a survivor. Her name was Gypsy Rose Blanchard. Springfield, Missouri, a pink house on a quiet street, a wheelchair by the door, and a mother everyone called a saint. Her name was D.D. Blanchard. To the world, she was the picture of devotion, a single mother caring for her sick little girl. Her daughter, Gypsy Rose, was fragile, soft-spoken, a child who had already survived more pain than most could imagine: leukemia, muscular dystrophy, seizures, a feeding tube. Doctors called her a miracle. Charities built her a home. Celebrities sent them gifts. Everyone loved the Blanchards, but none of it was true. Gypsy wasn't sick. She never had been. Every diagnosis, every surgery, every pill a lie. Dee Dee made it all up. She told doctors what to write, told her daughter what to say, and punished her if she ever questioned it. It started when Gypsy was small, too young to know what was real. Her mother told her she couldn't walk, so she didn't. She told her she was allergic to sugar, so she never tasted candy. She told her the world was full of danger and that she was the only one who could keep her safe. This was more than control. It was a prison built out of love. Dee Dee craved attention. She loved the sympathy, the interviews, the praise. The more the world adored her, the sicker Gypsy became. And behind every award, every smiling photo, was a secret, a daughter trapped inside her mother's fantasy. Years passed. Gypsy grew older, but Dee Dee never let her become an adult. She forged birth certificates, lied about her age, and told people Gypsy was still a teenager. When Gypsy started to question her illness, her mother drugged her. If she disobeyed, she was struck. And when she dreamed of freedom, her mother whispered, "You'd die without me." But Gypsy didn't die. She waited, she watched, and one night, she found the internet. It was her first taste of freedom, a world her mother couldn't touch. There, she met Nicholas Godejohn, a lonely man with dark fantasies of his own. He called her an angel. He told her he loved her. He said he would protect her. And Gypsy, desperate to be loved, for the first time, believed him. Together, they planned their escape. At first, it was harmless. They talked about running away. But soon, the conversations turned darker. Gypsy told him her mother would never let her go. Nicholas said he would make sure she couldn't stop them. On the night of June the 14th, 2015, Gypsy unlocked the door. Nicholas walked inside, carrying a knife. Dee Dee was asleep. Gypsy hid in the bathroom, hands over her ears. When it was over, her mother was gone. They fled to Wisconsin. They laughed. They took selfies. They posted a message online that said, "The bitch is dead." When police arrived at the house in Springfield, they found Dee Dee's body in bed. At first, they thought Gypsy had been kidnapped. Then came the truth. She could walk. She wasn't sick. The world that had pitied her suddenly didn't know what to feel. When Gypsy was arrested, she told detectives she had wanted to be free, that she never wanted her mother dead, just gone. She cried when she said it. but the tears didn't erase the blood. Her case became a storm of confusion. Was she a victim or a killer? Did she deserve punishment or help? Every headline asked the same question. How could a mother do this to her child? In court, doctors testified about years of fabricated illness. Neighbors spoke about Dee Dee's control, and for the first time, Gypsy's voice was her own. She pled guilty to second-degree murder, 10 years in prison. Nicholas Godejohn received life without parole. At sentencing, she told the judge, "All I wanted was to be free." And somehow, the world understood. Years later, Gypsy walked out of prison, healthy, married, smiling. The wheelchair was gone, the feeding tube gone. She had become what her mother never allowed her to be, a woman. But freedom isn't peace. In interviews, Gypsy says she forgives her mother, that she understands now how broken Dee Dee truly was. But in quieter moments, she admits she still dreams of her. Sometimes as a monster, sometimes as a mother. The house in Springfield still stands. The pink paint fades in the sun. Inside, the furniture is gone, the silence complete. A symbol of the blurred line between love and control. Because what Dee Dee did was not just abuse, it was devotion twisted into domination. And what Gypsy did was not just murder, it was rebellion, the final act of a girl who had never been allowed to live. Gypsy Rose Blanchard is both victim and villain, the daughter who destroyed her captor and the child who will never stop missing her. Her story forces a question that will never have a clean answer. Can you be both guilty and innocent at the same time? And if freedom costs a life, was it ever freedom at all? Her voice still echoes in every interview, steady but fragile, a reminder that some prisons have no walls at all. And while Missouri tried to understand the strange shape of her freedom, down in Tampa, Florida, another young woman was about to write her own chapter of darkness, one born not from lies or illness, but from rage. Her name was Nicole Nachtman. Tampa, Florida, a quiet neighborhood, palm trees swaying in the evening heat, houses glowing with the soft light of dinner time. It was the kind of place where people waved to their neighbors, where life felt ordinary, safe. But on one summer night in 2015, safety vanished from a home that had always seemed perfect. Her name was Nicole Nachtman, 19 years old, a college student at Florida State University, bright, quiet, and introverted. She kept to herself, never caused trouble, never stood out. But behind that silence, something dark was growing. Her mother, Miriam, was a strict woman. She'd spent her life building order, a Navy veteran, a disciplinarian, the kind of parent who believed structure was love. Her stepfather, Robert Deans, was kind and patient. He tried to keep the peace between them, but peace was not something Nicole understood. Friends said she often felt small, overshadowed, pressured to be perfect. She told one friend, "My mom never sees me. She only sees what I do wrong." In Nicole's mind, rules became chains, and the longer she lived under them, the more she wanted to break free. In late August, classes had just started. Nicole came home to visit for the weekend. The drive from Tallahassee to Tampa was 4 hours of silence and resentment. By the time she arrived, she was already boiling inside. Neighbors later recalled seeing the porch light flicker off around midnight. Then came 2 gunshots. Then nothing. The next morning, a coworker called the police after Miriam failed to show up for work. Officers arrived to find the front door locked. When they entered, they found Robert first lying in the hallway, a single gunshot to the back of the head. Miriam was upstairs, shot twice in her bedroom. Both were killed instantly. There were no signs of forced entry, no stolen valuables, nothing missing. The killer had been someone they trusted. The house was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner. A family photo still sat on the mantle, Nicole smiling beside her mother. But Nicole was gone. She had driven back to Tallahassee. When police found her, she was pacing outside her dorm, talking to herself. Her story changed with every question. At first, she said she didn't know anything. Then she said she had heard voices. Then she broke down and said, "It just happened so fast." Investigators noticed she had small bruises on her arms, gun residue on her hands. A search of her car found the weapon, her stepfather's own gun. It had been taken from the house days earlier. In her diary, they found the words, "She's never happy with me. She makes me feel worthless. Maybe if she's gone, I'll finally be free." When the trial began, the courtroom filled with people who couldn't believe it. A shy, soft-spoken girl accused of killing the only people who cared for her. Nicole sat still, eyes down, hair falling into her face. Her defense claimed mental illness, psychosis, delusion, the lingering trauma of emotional abuse. They said her mind had snapped, but prosecutors showed the truth: planning, motive, control. Nicole had packed a bag, taken the gun, and driven calmly away. No panic, no remorse. One juror later said, "She looked like a child, but she spoke like someone who had been angry for a long time." When she took the stand, her voice barely carried across the room. She said her mother pushed her too far, that she felt trapped, that she just wanted it to stop. The jury listened, but sympathy has limits. After 4 hours of deliberation, the verdict came. Guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, life in prison. Nicole didn't cry, she didn't beg, she just stared ahead, expressionless, as if the reality hadn't yet reached her. Her father, who had sat through the trial, wept quietly in the back row. He told reporters, "She wasn't raised to be this way. I don't know who that was in there." In prison interviews, Nicole's story never changes. She says she was overwhelmed, that she lost control. But her tone stays flat, empty, like someone describing a movie they once saw. Psychologists who evaluated her say she shows little remorse but constant justification. She believes she was driven to it, that if her mother had been kinder, things might have been different. Maybe that's true, but it doesn't bring Miriam or Robert back. Their home was sold years later, the walls repainted, the blood erased, but some things don't wash away. Neighbors still remember that night, the sound of silence after the final shot. Nicole Nachtman's story is not about sudden rage. It's about quiet resentment, the kind that grows, unnoticed, until it explodes. She wasn't evil, she was broken, and in the space between those 2 words, a family disappeared. Because sometimes, the most terrifying killers don't scream or shout. They whisper, they cry, they believe right up until the end that they were the victim all along. And while Florida mourned yet another family lost to domestic bloodshed, half a world away. On the island of Bali, a daughter's rage was about to make headlines, a murder in paradise that would shock the world and turn a family vacation into a horror story. Her name was Heather Mack. Bali, Indonesia. A paradise of sunlight and sea breeze. A place where tourists come to forget the world. But in August of 2014, a luxury resort became the scene of a nightmare. Her name was Heather Mack, 19 years old, wealthy, beautiful, and angry. She had been raised in privilege in Chicago, the daughter of socialite Sheila von Wiese Mack and composer James Mack. Her father died when she was young, and after his death, her relationship with her mother began to unravel. Sheila was elegant, disciplined, a woman who believed in control and appearances. Heather was wild, impulsive, and never learned how to hear the word no. Their home was filled with shouting and slammed doors. Heather ran away more than once. Her mother always brought her back. Love was never the problem. Control was. By the time she turned 18, Heather was already in trouble shoplifting, fighting, spending her inheritance on parties. And then she met Tommy Schaefer. Tommy was 21, a musician, charming but aimless. He wasn't part of Heather's world, and Sheila made that clear. She called him manipulative, dangerous. She told Heather to stay away. Heather didn't listen. When she became pregnant, the fights escalated. Her mother threatened to cut her off financially, to take custody of the baby. So, Heather and Tommy made a plan, one that ended not in freedom, but in murder. They told Sheila they wanted to take a trip together, a chance to make peace. She agreed. Maybe she still hoped she could fix things. They flew to Bali, checked into a 5-star resort, and posed for photos by the pool. To the outside world, they looked like a family mending itself. Inside, everything was already breaking. On the night of August the 12th, hotel staff heard shouting from their suite. Security went to check, but Heather opened the door, smiling. She said everything was fine. Hours later, Tommy was seen on camera dragging a large suitcase down the hallway. The next morning, that same suitcase was found abandoned in the trunk of a taxi. Inside, wrapped in blood-stained sheets, was the body of Sheila von Wiese Mack. She had been bludgeoned to death. Heather and Tommy fled, but they didn't get far. They were found at another hotel just a few miles away. When police arrested them, Heather claimed she didn't know what had happened. She said Tommy had snapped. She said she was in the bathroom, but text messages told a different story. Messages between the two revealed planning talk of anger, money, and revenge. In court, Heather sat quiet, her hand resting on her pregnant belly. She told the judges her mother had hit her, that she had been afraid. Tommy said he acted to protect her. The judges didn't believe them. Heather Mack was convicted of assisting murder, 10 years in prison. Tommy Schaefer received 18. As her sentence was read, Heather showed no emotion. When reporters shouted questions, she smiled and said, "I loved my mom." She gave birth to her daughter Stella, inside Bali's Karabokan prison, a place known for heat, disease, and violence. The world called Stella the suitcase baby. And for years, that small child became the center of one of the strangest murder stories ever told, a child born from luxury and blood. In prison, Heather adjusted quickly. She learned the language, she charmed the guards, she posed for photos, gave interviews, and seemed almost proud of her notoriety. When asked if she regretted what she'd done, she said, "I regret getting caught." After 7 years, she was released early for good behavior. She walked out of prison smiling, Stella in her arms, ready to start over. But the past followed her home. In 2021, the United States charged her again, this time with conspiracy and obstruction related to her mother's murder. She was extradited back to Chicago. She entered court in designer clothes, head high, the same faint smile on her lips. Heather Mack's story is not about madness, it's about arrogance. The belief that the rules that apply to everyone else will never apply to you. She thought her charm would protect her, that she could outrun guilt the same way she had outrun her mother's rules. But guilt travels light. It fits neatly inside any suitcase. Today, Heather sits in a federal prison. She says she wants to rebuild her life, to raise her daughter, to be better. But when asked if she forgives herself, she says only, "Not yet." The case of Heather Mack is a tragedy written in wealth and entitlement, a daughter who confused freedom with revenge, and a mother who tried too late to save her. The luxury resort where it all happened still rents out the same room. Tourists check in, unaware of the blood that once stained the floor. At night, the wind carries the sound of the sea through the open balcony doors. Peaceful, beautiful, and empty. Because paradise doesn't erase what happens in the dark, it only hides it. And while the world followed the glamorous horror of a mother killed in paradise across the ocean in Washington state, a different kind of family tragedy was waiting to unfold, one colder, quieter, and far more methodical. A woman who would destroy her entire bloodline over money, resentment, and a lifetime of anger she refused to let go. Her name was Michele Anderson. Carnation, Washington. A small town surrounded by fir trees and mist, where Christmas lights glowed softly through the fog, and families gathered for warmth and laughter. But on Christmas Eve of 2007, one home on East and Twistle Street would become a house of silence. Her name was Michele Anderson. She was 31 years old, a daughter, a sister, a woman whose life had slowly filled with bitterness. To her family, she was the one who could never quite grow up. She drifted between jobs, borrowed money, and held grudges longer than love. Her parents, Wayne and Judy, had spent years trying to help her. They paid her bills, gave her a place to live, and listened when she complained that no one respected her. But Michele didn't want help. She wanted validation, and when she didn't get it, resentment began to harden into hate. Her older brother, Scott, was everything she wasn't. Stable, responsible, a father of 2. He and his wife, Erica, had built a quiet, happy life with their children, Olivia and Nathan. But to Michele, Scott was the favorite, the chosen one. And every small slight, real or imagined, became proof that she didn't belong. By the end of 2007, the anger had turned poisonous. She told her boyfriend, Joseph McEnroe, that her family had betrayed her, that they used her, that they had it coming. Joseph, quiet and obedient, believed every word. He loved her, and that love would soon make him complicit in slaughter. On the night of December the 24th, the Anderson family gathered for Christmas. Laughter, music, wrapping paper, and the smell of dinner filling the air. It was the kind of evening meant for forgiveness, but forgiveness was no longer possible. Just after sunset, Michele and Joseph drove to her parents' home. She carried a handgun. He brought ammunition. When they entered, Wayne and Judy greeted them with smiles. Moments later, gunfire echoed through the house. Wayne was shot first, then Judy. The bodies fell beside the Christmas tree. They dragged them to the backyard shed and waited in the dark. Because Michele wasn't finished, her brother and his family were on their way. When Scott and Erica arrived with the children, the killers were waiting. Joseph greeted them politely. He even helped carry in presents. Then, without warning, he raised the gun. Scott was shot in the head. Erica screamed, begged for her children, but Michele told her, "You had it coming." Then Joseph pulled the trigger again. Olivia was 5, Nathan was 3. Michele told Joseph to kill them too. He hesitated. She didn't. She said, "They'll just grow up to hate me." So, he did it. 2 more shots, 2 small lives erased in an instant. When it was over, the house fell silent, the hum of Christmas lights, the ticking of the clock, the faint smell of smoke. Michele stood among the bodies of her family and felt, for the first time in years, calm. They stayed in the house for hours, cleaning, moving bodies, planning lies. They believed they had done the right thing. They believed they would never be caught, but evil always underestimates memory. Days later, Michele's sister, Mary, found it strange that no one had shown up for Christmas. She called. No answer. She drove to the property, walked up the driveway, and saw the bodies through a window. She called the police. When detectives arrived, they found 6 people dead. A family wiped out by one of their own. Michele was arrested within hours. She confessed almost immediately. She said, "They wouldn't listen to me. They deserved it." Her lack of remorse stunned investigators. She described the murders with precision, how she planned it, how she waited, how she gave the order to kill the children. There were no tears, no guilt, just calm explanation. Joseph wept during his interrogation. Michele did not. She called it justice. At trial, the courtroom was silent as prosecutors described the scene. The jury saw photos, heard Michele's taped confession, and listened to her flat, emotionless tone. She showed no reaction when the verdict came. Guilty of 6 counts of aggravated first-degree murder. She received life in prison without the possibility of parole. When asked later why she did it, she said, "I just wanted peace." But peace doesn't come from blood. It comes from truth. And that was something Michele Anderson never understood. In destroying her family, she finally became the center of attention. But what she gained was the silence she had always created for herself. The Anderson home was demolished soon after. The land sits empty now, grass growing over the foundation, a quiet field surrounded by trees. The only sound left is the wind, soft, distant, and heavy with memory. Michele Anderson's story is not about madness, it's about envy. About what happens when a lifetime of bitterness turns into belief. The belief that you've been wronged for so long, that revenge becomes your only form of peace. She called it justice. But justice doesn't bury children. She will spend the rest of her life behind bars, surrounded by silence, living in the one place where no one will ever have to hear her again. And as the world slowly forgets her name, her story lingers, another reminder that evil doesn't always scream. Sometimes it sits quietly at the table, passing gifts on Christmas Eve. If you've made it this far, you've walked through some of the darkest corners of human nature. Daughters, mothers, and families torn apart by envy, fear, and control. If stories like these stay with you, then you understand something most people don't. Evil rarely looks like a monster. It looks like love that's been poisoned. Take a deep breath. Step back into the light. And if you wanted to keep exploring the stories that the world tries to forget, subscribe, because the darkness never sleeps, and neither do we.